This is Sky News at 1, our main story. Running to represent Brexit Britain, UKIP's leader confirms he'll try again to become an MP.
This is an election which has been called on Brexit. I am the leader of the most Eurosceptic political party in Britain, therefore it makes perfect sense for me to go to the most Eurosceptic area in the country.
Consistently attacked, consistently proved right. Jeremy Corbyn launches a defence of his leadership and criticises Theresa May.
Insecure leaders want to feel stronger by asking you to give them more power. I recognise strong leadership as equipping you with more power.
Also this lunchtime, the EU says it's reached unanimous agreement over Brexit negotiations with Britain. Bad. Donald Trump condemns the latest missile test attempt by North Korea. The call for drinking duty-free alcohol on planes to be made a criminal offence. And British boxing dates with destiny. Anthony Joshua prepares for the sport's biggest fight in years. A very good afternoon to you. UKIP's leader has told Sky News this lunchtime it makes perfect sense for him to try to win election to Parliament in the most Eurosceptic constituency in Britain. Paul Nuttall will run in Boston and Skegness, where 3/4 of voters backed Brexit. Mr Nuttall insisted the fact that he had no links to the constituency didn't matter and said he wouldn't quit as leader if he lost.
You don't have to be from a local area to be an MP, OK? This isn't a local council by-election or something like that in Boston and Skegness. The simple fact is, this is an election which has been called on Brexit. I am the leader of the most Eurosceptic political party in Britain, therefore it makes perfect sense for me to go to the most Eurosceptic area in the country.
Well, Jeremy Corbyn said leaders who want more power and strength are insecure today as he took on Conservative criticism of his judgment and character head-on. He was speaking after calling on young voters to step up and register to vote.
For many years, I couldn't see much beyond how so many political leaders manipulated us, while giving in again and again to powerful vested interests. I did not want to be like that. And it wasn't clear to me there could be another way. But I've learned there is. Whereas insecure leaders want to feel stronger by asking you to give them more power, I recognise strong leadership as equipping you with more power.
Let's go live to Westminster and talk to our reporter Sarah Hadjibagheri. Very good afternoon to you, Sarah. So a busy day of campaigning today.
Indeed. Jeremy Corbyn kicking things off, really going on the attack. He's a man that we know very much as a politician for his principles, but today he started talking about personality, and he's defended one of the attributes that he's often criticised for, his leadership style. He also attacked Theresa May. He said that she had a presidential, was the word he used, premiership. He said that she was cooking up a Brexit for the few, not the many. And he also made a direct plea to young people. He said that he needed them to stand up, to register and to look after their own futures, because only the Labour Party would be looking out for them. He said that 2 million young people are not on the register between the ages of 18 and 24. And he said the Conservative Party really want this election to be about Brexit, but actually there's so many issues domestically happening that the Conservative government are not addressing. And he's had a track record throughout his political career of always fighting for a fairer Britain. Here's what he had to say.
In 1983, before many in this room were born, I stood up in Parliament for the first time and used my maiden speech to condemn deeply damaging cuts in public services and our precious National Health Service. The tragedy is, I could make the same speech today, and it will once again hold as true today as it did then.
Jeremy Corbyn speaking there. Well, let's talk about Mr Nuttall. Interesting that he's decided to stand in this constituency. A lot of people questioning what links he has to it.
Indeed, he's standing in Boston and Skegness in Lincolnshire. It's got a Conservative MP at the moment with a 4,000 majority. Now, it is interesting because he's not from the local area. He defended that earlier, but it's also interesting because of the politics at play at a local level. So it was a very strong, had a strong leave vote. 76% of people in Boston voted to leave. It's the most strongly leave place in the country. However, its current incumbent MP, Matt Warman, actually campaigned to remain. So he's obviously banking on that going in his favour. However, he has stood multiple times before and has never actually managed to get elected. And it's interesting also that he's chosen this constituency as opposed to Hartlepool, which was hotly tipped as the constituency he would stand in. He would have been up against Labour there with a much smaller majority of 3,000, but he's obviously thinking that he could have more success up against the Conservatives, particularly a Conservative he voted to remain.
OK, Sarah, many thanks indeed. Well, off the back of this news this afternoon that Mr Nuttall will be indeed standing in Boston and Skegness, we've got a statement from the incumbent Conservative MP for Boston and Skegness, who is Matt Warman. This is what he's had to say. I hear from people on the doorsteps here in Lincolnshire how much they want her to get the best deal in the Brexit negotiations and build a strong economy to deliver the best local health service and local infrastructure. Clearly he's talking about the Prime Minister there. A vote for any other candidates risk a coalition of chaos led by Jeremy Corbyn, putting our nature's future at risk. That line about the coalition of chaos is what we've been hearing over the last few weeks from Conservative officials. So a statement there from Matt Warman, the incumbent Member of Parliament for Boston and Skegness, his reaction to the news that Paul Nuttall is standing in his constituency. Well, later today, the Prime Minister, Theresa May, will be campaigning in Scotland. This morning, SNP leader Nicola Sturgeon has been addressing voters in Glasgow, arguing the Tories need a strong opposition in Scotland.
This general election really matters to the future of our country. It will determine whether Scotland continues to move forward or is dragged back by the Tories. And it will ensure that the decisions about the future of our country, whatever that turns out to be, is taken here by the Scottish Parliament and the Scottish people, not by an increasingly hardline right-wing Tory government at Westminster.
The President of the European Council says that the EU's remaining 27 members have reached a unanimous agreement over their negotiating position on Brexit. Going into the meeting, Donald Tusk also said the past had to be dealt with before any future relationships with Britain were discussed.
We all want a close and strong future relationship with the UK. There's absolutely no question about it. But before discussing the future, we have to sort out our past, and we will handle it in genuine care, with genuine care.
Well, let's talk to our Europe correspondent Mark Stone, who's in Brussels for us this afternoon. Any indication as to what this agreement is, Mark?
Well, it is the same agreement that they've been talking about for many, many months now, and at the core of it is the idea that the exit has to be negotiated before any future agreement can be discussed. Three core principles that the EU 27 wants to make sure are ironed out as a matter of urgency before any future talks about Britain's relationship outside of the European Union can be discussed. And they are the rights of citizens, EU citizens living in the UK and indeed UK citizens living in Europe. Those have to be sorted out. What rights do they have? That has to be dealt with as a matter of urgency. The so-called exit bill, a very it's not a particularly clear phrase. It's not an exit bill. It is, so say the 27, the financial commitment that Britain owes and has signed up to as a member of the European Union. How much money is that? Well, we don't know yet because no one's done the maths. There is speculation it's up to £50 billion. The truth of the matter is that no one really knows how much it is because it is an ongoing financial commitment until the moment that Britain finally leaves the European Union. But whatever the amount, a bill will have to be paid, so say the 27. Ireland is another key issue, a core principle that they want to iron out before they can move forward with the new trade deal, whatever that may be, the border between the north and the south of Ireland. What form will that border take? These are very, very difficult issues that will need to be discussed. So in a sense, they are saying the same thing as they've said time and again. What they've done today with, I think, very interesting symbolism is agreed their their principles, their negotiating strategy, in less than a minute. That has to be a record. In most summits, we remember the summits over the Greek financial crisis, they took days and days and days. They were record-long summits. This has to be a record-short summit. They agreed it in less than a minute. Going in, Angela Merkel, the German Chancellor, had this to tell us.
We want good relations with the United Kingdom, but we also want, as 27, to represent our common interests. We have succeeded extremely well in doing this so far, and I think it is also a good starting point in the negotiations to finalise this. We will firstly, and this is what the guidelines today will be about, negotiate the exit, and then we will be ready to talk about the future.
Britain, throughout this Brexit negotiation, has been assuming that the unity of the 27 would fracture. It may well do over time, but for now, and with, as I said, symbolism in agreeing it in under a minute, the unity, the 27, is showing the utmost unity.
Mark, many thanks indeed. Donald Trump is urging China to do more to ease the tensions between America and North Korea. It comes as another missile test by Kim Jong-un's regime in Pyongyang failed before leaving North Korean territory. Well, Sky's Ashish Joshi is here, so he's asking for China to do a lot more, but questions as to how much more the Chinese government can do.
Yeah, that's exactly right. There is a recognition within the White House and with Donald Trump that talking about action against North Korea is ratcheting up the tension in the region. There's concern from Japan, there's concern from South Korea. The Chinese and Russians have warned America about their language and about what they're doing. And they're concerned that this is the biggest challenge facing the world at the moment, because clearly the North Koreans are going ahead with their missile tests, irrespective of what the United Nations has said. This is what Donald Trump had to say, but I have to stress, this is what he said in an interview before this latest test. So it was last night, but before this morning's test firing by the North Koreans.
There's never been any kind of a relationship that we've had with China. Look at what China's doing. They're turning back the coal ships from North Korea. They're putting a lot of pressure on North Korea. Now, I don't know. I have a lot of respect, and I really like President Xi. I don't know that he's going to be able to pull it off. It may have to be a much more difficult ending, to be honest with you. But he is trying. I believe he is trying. And he's a friend of mine, and I really like him a lot. We'll see what happens.
He's a friend of mine. I really like him a lot. Perhaps recognition that diplomacy might be the answer that the Americans are looking for what is a very tense situation. But the Chinese have already said it's between Washington and Pyongyang to sort this out, and they're not going to interfere and meddle. Let's look across at the timeline of exactly what's been going on in North Korea, the missiles being fired over the last 2 months. On February the 11th, North Korea launched a new intermediate-range ballistic missile into the Sea of Japan. Less than a month later, it fired 4 ballistic missiles from their launch site, Dongchang-ri in the northwest. They flew for about 1,000 kilometers before falling into the Sea of Japan. On April the 4th, a medium-range ballistic missile was test-fired from the eastern port of Sinpo into the Sea of Japan. And then it test-fired an unidentified land-based missile on April the 15th. That exploded almost immediately after takeoff. And this brings us to yesterday's missile, which was fired from the Pukchang airfield. That broke apart minutes after takeoff. And all of this, in the background, you have the American action. On February the 21st, its Navy began routine operations in the South China Sea. And on April the 12th, it sent a clear signal to the North Koreans, an armada, a fleet in the just off the North Korean coast in the Korean waters there. And on the 19th of April, American and South Korean troops began an 11-day joint military exercise. So both sides are clearly ramping up. Most people would say this is saber-rattling. We've been here before. But if you look at what happened in Japan this morning, they shut down their metro system after news of this missile launch. 15,000 passengers affected. So clearly a lot of concern in the region that this might be more than just the empty saber-rattling we've had in the past, with tensions being ratcheted up all the time.
Clearly an uncertain time. Ashish, many thanks indeed. Brash, bold and at times chaotic, there's no doubt that Donald Trump's first 100 days in office are in stark contrast to President Obama. He's taken a much more muscular approach to foreign affairs and suffered internal setbacks over his team's links to Russia and his failure to repeal Obamacare. Our US correspondent Cordelia Lynch has this assessment.
The president spent the eve of his 100th day in office addressing a euphoric crowd of gun owners in Atlanta. The powerful group endorsed him early on, plowing millions of dollars into helping him get to the White House.
The 8-year assault on your Second Amendment freedoms has come to a crashing end. You have a true friend and champion in the White House.
His first chapter in power saw him flex his military muscle with a strike in Syria. It was his first major foreign policy test and received bipartisan praise.
It is in this vital national security interest of the United States to prevent and deter the spread and use of deadly chemical weapons.
But there is another ominous and pressing test ahead. In North Korea, the president faces an unpredictable leader, willing to launch a missile on the same day the U.S. administration said it was open to talks.
We much prefer a negotiated solution to this problem, but we are committed to defending ourselves and our allies against North Korean aggression.
On the home front, Donald Trump has had some clear-cut achievements. He's inspired confidence in the U.S. economy, and with Neil Gorsuch appointed as Supreme Court Justice, he fulfilled a campaign pledge.
I think he's going to be an outstanding member of the Supreme Court.
Trump also pushed through with his promise to withdraw from the Trans-Pacific Partnership trade deal. But he's had to rely on executive orders, and the man known for his deal-making couldn't strike a deal on Obamacare.
We did not have quite the votes to replace this law. And so, yeah, we're going to be living with Obamacare for the foreseeable future. I don't know how long it's going to take us to replace this law.
His travel ban failed at the first hurdle and lit the fuse of protest. The businessman turned commander-in-chief is a newcomer to politics, a complex riddle, and a leader the world is still trying to work out. He says the benchmark of 100 days is a ridiculous standard, but it's a milestone that has already produced what feels like a political lifetime. Cordelia Lynch, Sky News, Washington.
Well, let's speak to Cordelia, who's in Washington there for us. Good afternoon to you, Cordelia. So he's had a number of challenges over the first 100 days. It's been a fascinating thing to watch, and facing another big challenge with North Korea.
Indeed, Gamal, and Donald Trump and his administration now have to decide how to respond. The president took to Twitter in the wake of that failed missile launch yesterday to say that he believed it was an affront to China, North Korea's main ally, and as he described him, China's respected president, Xi Jinping. That relationship is considered key by the Trump administration. They want to try and work with China to curb North Korea's nuclear weapons program. The missile launch came yesterday on the same day, of course, that the UN Security Council was meeting. The Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson, said that if they failed to curb the nuclear weapons program, it could have catastrophic consequences. I think we saw, though, yesterday, Gamal, a potential gulf in the administration's response. It was a brief, if perhaps terse, statement that was issued as soon as Donald Trump touched down on Marine One, saying that the president had been briefed and that he was aware, but he took to the medium he so often uses when touching on global diplomacy, Twitter, of course, to show that he was unhappy at this. It is a deep concern. It is becoming a very prominent concern for his government. It is complex. They know they need to try and get international actors on side. Today, the USS Carl Vinson, the aircraft carrier group, is now in the North Korean peninsula carrying out exercises alongside the South Koreans. So this is a febrile climate, but they know, as the Chinese have urged, that they have to tread carefully in the wake of this deeply pressing threat.
OK, Cordelia, thank you. Well, we'll see Cordelia again later this hour, and we'll have a special programme to mark President Trump's first 100 days in office tonight. 24 hours in Trump's America. Join us for that at 9 p.m. You're watching Sky News. Still to come, Olympic champion Anthony Joshua speaks to Sky News about his bout against Vladimir Klitschko.
The question, of course, is who will be striking goal.
OK, let's get more now on the EU summit, which this lunchtime has unanimously agreed the bloc's negotiating position over Brexit. I'm joined by Stephanie Bolton, who is a German newspaper Die Welt's correspondent in London. Thanks for coming in, Stephanie. So your initial thoughts on this summit that is taking place and the fact that the European leaders have now saying that we are going to be singing with one voice.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's probably one of the fastest and smoothest summit they ever had. I read on Twitter actually that within a minute they already signed the guidelines. And if you look at the guidelines, what is interesting about them, and especially for the British government, it's very interesting that there are a lot of points which reflect the interests of certain countries. For example, the EU citizens, they talk about 5 years. If you have been for more than 5 years in the UK, you should get the right to stay. That was pressure of Poland to get this in. You have something about the city and financial regulation. That was the pressure of France. There's something else about the future model, the economic model and safeguards. This has been for the pressure of Germany. So this is why I think people here in the UK are saying, oh, well, let's see, and we will try to divide the EU 27. I think this is not going to happen. Plus, it's not in the interest of the UK, because this will mean they have to discuss even more, and the time is very, very short. The clock is ticking, and you only have some months to get everything settled.
So the 27 other countries are all singing from the same hymn sheet, and that's the line that we've had since day one, since Article 50 was invoked. But do you think that will continue, say if there is another major crisis facing the European continent, whether it's an issue with migrants and refugees, or whether you have another financial crisis that we saw with Greece and the pressures that was facing the continent over that?
No, I don't think that would have any effect on the unity of the 27. On the contrary, because that would mean it would force the 27 to focus even more on their domestic or EU issues, and there's even less time and less interest in the Brexit negotiations. So I think actually any crisis, any EU 27 crisis, is only for the disadvantage of the UK and getting a good deal.
How are they in Germany and indeed in the rest of Europe digesting the coming general election? Is that going to be a good thing for the negotiations, or does it not matter either way?
No, I mean, some people say it's good for the negotiations if Theresa May gets a bigger majority, but far more important in Germany are the French elections. There was a lot of interest in the French elections. There's not so much interest in the British elections. Plus, there's elections in Germany in September, and they are very interesting. There's a lot of dynamics now with Angela Merkel being more under threat. Not to lose, I don't think she's going to lose, but it's going to be tight for her. So there's far more interest in Germany on their own election. OK,
fascinating stuff. Stephanie, many thanks for coming in. Let's have a look at the weather now.
While East Asia enjoys a pleasant evening, inspiration blooms in Europe.